In this video, I will break down one of my latest mixes, a dope hip-hop track called Gotham City. Let's listen to it for a second.
Man, fuck 'em, Edgar Hoover cops. Fucking losers watch me write these bars in Google Docs. Then spot me copping Glocks and hopping out of Uber cars. To pop so many Rugers off, these goobers won't know who to call. And when they get blasted with the chrome, the blood splatters in a pattern like fucking antlers out the dome. I carry my city like I'm Atlas with the globe. And if these rappers didn't know I'm the fucking baddest, let them know. Let them know I'm the Leviathan. Let them know I don't admire them. Let them know.
The mix and the mastering were hybrid, so we're gonna see, of course, all the plugins, the routing, all the effects, and also all the settings for the hardware, what piece of hardware went where and why. Let's get to the video. Okay, we heard the master, the final product. Let's dive into the mix. This is gonna be probably a 2 or 3 video series. I don't know, it depends how long it takes me to break down the mix. We're gonna see all the plugins, all the routing, all the effects, and also all the hardware that I used and all the settings for it. This is gonna be a members only mixing course. Members, of course, of the YouTube channel, you can join by clicking the button down below. So if you wanna see everything, become a member and you can see the whole series, and that's going to be the case for the next mixing tutorial and courses. I'm going to post this and other short clips on the channel so you can have an idea of how this course is going to be, but if you bought any of my courses on Pro Mix Academy, you know what to expect. There's also plenty of free videos on the channel. Anyway, let's dive in. First of all, here at the bottom, these 2 blue tracks are the master and the final mix, okay? So I'm gonna try to level match the mix and the master and just hear the difference between these two to start with. So this is the mix.
Man, fuck 'em, Edgar Hoover cops. Fucking losers watch me write these bars in Google Docs. Then spot me copping Glocks and hopping out of Uber cars. To pop so many Rugers off these.
This is the master.
Copping Glocks and hopping out of Uber cars. To pop so many Rugers off, these goobers won't know who to call. And when they get blasted with the chrome, the blood splatters in a pattern like fucking antlers out the dome. I carry my city like I'm Atlas with the globe. And if these rappers didn't splatters in a pattern like fucking antlers out the dome. I carry my city like I'm Atlas with the globe. And if these
Please notice that I lowered the level of the master by 7 dB to try to level match, but you can hear regardless the level, the master sounds more open, sounds more aggressive, more dense, all things that I've said in the past. Mastering is not just about loudness, is more about this, is about enhancing if there's room for improvement. An already great mix, make it loud without smashing it, without destroying it, and also in the process sometimes, if it's done correctly, make it sound better and use the tool that we use for loudness to your advantage, like clipping and saturation and limiting. They can be enhancing tool if used correctly. It's not easy, but it's possible. But we will see all this, of course, at the end of the course in the mastering stage. So let's mute this track and let's start taking a look at what tracks we have. This is not a high track count mix. We actually have only, so to speak, 35 audio tracks. But as you can see, just scrolling, there's a lot of parallel channels. There's a lot of effects channels and groups and subgroups. So this is gonna be interesting. Let's start with our drum tracks, which are the first top to bottom. Then we have bass, we have the synths in purple, we have some Eastern guitars and sax and other one-shot sound, these in orange. Then we have the lead vocals, all the effects, some printed effects that I created, and then all the bluish, light blue tracks are effects for vocals. Then we have a couple of doubles, 1 track of ad-libs, and then one-shot effect sounds, okay? These in pink. Then we have 2 tracks of reverse effects that the producer sent me, and then we have our 2 bus. Of course, usually the very first thing that I would do would be gain staging, but like I said, I already mixed this track, so I can't start from scratch this one. But the important thing to say is that after I did my gain staging, I set my 2 bus chain, okay? So I do this pretty much at the beginning of the mix. Now on the 2 bus, we have Neve 542s, we have the Fusion with the Wes Audio mastering compressor in insert, and then I have my Drummer 1974 parametric EQ. For a 35 tracks, of course, gain staging changes based on track count. For a 35 tracks, when I have all these elements playing, I probably aim for anywhere between -10 and -6 peak level on my tubas, but that's just a number. For me, my gain staging is tied to my hardware. When everything is playing with faders at 0, that's very important. Remember, I do my gain staging with trim plugins. In this case, I use the SSL channel to do gain staging, the input knob, okay? You can see here, this one is a -8. So without touching the faders, my faders, for the most part, even when the mix is finished, you can see from the screen, they almost all of them, they are a unity, they are a 0. Because the way you do the rough mix is you want everything playing, faders at 0, and then with the trim, you start mixing basically, rough mix. So you want to hear everything. You want to hear the level of the kick and the snare being pretty much where you want it, the vocals, the background track, the bass. And then when you have the balance, you see where you're hitting the tubas. At that point, I'm setting my tubas compression. I'm setting my neaves first. And for me, the sweet spot is for the saturation of the tape effect when the peaks hit the first amber light. I'll show you the settings, so don't worry. And then I engage usually the red silk transformer and I turn on my tubas. But the important part is I usually shoot for a couple of dB of compression when no processing is applied, just rough mix. Why? Because after that moment, every processing that I do, so EQ, compression, parallel, anything, saturation, has to be a unity gain, okay? So I compress a kick, I EQ a kick, I compress a vocal, I EQ a vocal. With and without the processing, they have to be at the same level. If you do this, the mix is so much easier and way more streamlined because, first of all, you can bypass everything and have the same balance without shift in volume. And second, you can set up your two-bus chain, your compressor, and not be worried about running out of headroom on your two-bus or having to readjust the threshold on your compressor. For example, for the saturator, you cannot really do that. You have to hit them at the right spot with a certain settings. Because of that, the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on my two-bus processing here. I'm gonna play you the mix with and without all the two-bus processing, keeping in mind that I start just with the neve and the compressor and then I add the fusion and the EQ way later, okay? But so you understand how much my two-bus chain affects the mix.
Them feed is theater clowns. It's robbing season. I'ma beat them, fucking kneel them down. Make them cop a plea for freedom, leave them bleeding out. I'm Carlito, mob leader, Don Vito, Nino Brown. And I'm OG like Montana. I don't mean French or henna, more like Tony from Havana. Cause if they try to throw me in the handcuffs, I got my coldies with the handguns, the puppet police if they act tough.
Okay, so you hear first, the low end changes drastically. I lean on my two-bus chain a lot. I have a lot of stuff. It's normal that changes the mix that much. The top end is clearer, is wider, is just more of everything. And I can show you right away my two-bus compressor settings because the Wes Audio has the plugin interface. So you can see attack is at 20, ratio 4. The release is super fast, 0.1. Then I have 2 dB of makeup gain with iron mode. This is a current transformers that add a color. And the THD, which is the total harmonic distortion, is a more mid-forward kind of saturation as opposed to the red, the iron. See, this is the clean output. This is the red iron. Adds this low and low mid grit to it. And I'm hitting.
Them feed is theater clowns. It's robbing season. I'ma beat them, fucking kneel them down. Make them cop a plea for freedom, leave them bleeding out.
A couple of dB of gain reduction, okay? So sometimes when you do gain staging and you start at that level of compression and then you start pushing into your two-bus because, like I said before, you want to level match any processing during the mix, but sometimes you want something louder just because you want it louder, just because that's mixing. Usually I boost with the hardware. You will hear it in the vocals. If I want more level, I just boost with the hardware, and that's wanted. So I set the machines like I did in this mix for the snare and the vocals. I set my EQ compression by level matching, and then I decide, okay, now I want the snare louder, and I turn up a makeup gain. So sometimes you end up you start with a couple of dB on your 2 bus and you end up pushing like 3 or 4 or 5 dB. Most of the time that's wanted, at least for my methods. I want to push into the hardware chain harder because that particular song sounds better. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to back off a little bit, okay? So this is case by case. Anyway, let's bypass the 2 bus and let's start seeing the single tracks. Now I'm gonna also bypass here the fatso, one of my 2 fatso that is on the drum bus. You can see I color coded. The green tracks are all drums, and they have the yellow tracks are aux tracks that I sum, for example, in this case, a kick and parallel kick. Then they sum and they go to the kick sum, and the kick sum go to the drum bus. Same for bass. I have 3 tracks. I bus them to the bass out. Same thing. So every time you see a black aux track, that's an output group, okay? So let's start with the kick drum. You'll see a trend. The SSL channel is always on the first slot, mostly for gain staging. Sometimes for filters, a little bit of EQ and compression, like in this case, we have a little bit of compression and gain staging. So this is without everything on it. This is with the SSL. There's going to be a level drop for the gain staging. I dropped it by 8 dB, and that's probably what you will see across all tracks. Okay, you see I have a little bit of compression. The SSL compressor, even if you're not compressing at all, in this case we are touching 3 dB, there's a trick that if you turn the threshold all the way up, it adds a little bit of grit. And sometimes you will see me using the SSL that way. It's just a trick that whoever uses an SSLG knows, and I love waves because they actually recreate that very well. So there's a little bit of compression, then this 1.2 dB of boost with the frequency divider. I like the G channel better than the E because of this, because it has the frequency divider on the low mid and the frequency multiplier on the high mid. So it goes really, really high and really, really low, but the lows I like particularly because they're very focused, with and without the EQ. Okay, more grit, a little more body at the bottom. First EQ, just a little 1.5 boost at 4K to add a little bit of click to the kick. All right, but what makes it is the parallel channel. I send the kick to a parallel channel, which is this. I'm going to solo it. The SSL doing nothing, just open by default. And this is not really a compression parallel channel, but is more a saturation. I'm using the Chandler Zener limiter, but I'm not using it in limit mode. I'm using it in THD mode. So it's basically a saturator. So here's how it sounds. Okay, and together they sound like this. A lot bigger with a parallel channel. These two go into the kick sum aux bus, in which I have the SSL for filter, so I'm filtering them as one. Of course, it's a parallel, nothing else, no EQ, no anything. And the capitator, let me bypass everything here, but the SSL. A little bit of distortion. Spiff, which is a multi-band transient enhancer, and I'm using it to, you can see, add a little more snap without using a compressor to the kick drum. All right, it's a lot flatter without it. I really like that. API 2500 for a little bit of compression. Bark of Dog, one of my favorites, to remove the really, really subby low end, because we have an 808 later on, we'll see it, from 47 and down, and boosting at the corner frequency by 1.6 dB. This helps tighten this kick and make it a little bigger. you also extend the low end a little bit, okay? After there's the Pro Q3, but I'm just using it for the spectrum analyzer. And this is the original kick without any parallel or kick sound processing. And this is with everything else. Okay, so you see here, the kick drum as it came in is probably higher in level than now with all the processing and the parallel channel. Always level match processed versus unprocessed. Then we have this other kick drum here. And this goes to the parallel kick too. In here, SSL for gain staging, another ATP down. There's nothing processing wise on it, but there's the devil lock after to add more distortion and more grit. Without. Here, if we bypass both, the gain staging is probably going to be the same. Okay, so perfect example. This goes to the parallel kick. Right, big difference. It's denser, it's longer, it's wider too, okay, it's more aggressive. So these are the two kicks after we have the snare dry. Now for this one, I already have two hardware units. I have my West Audio Prometheus Pultec and the Expressor. I'm gonna show you the settings of this, but first, SSL channel has a little bit of top end here, 8K and about 4 or 5K here, and just gain staging and the filters. So let's bypass the hardware. Without EQ. Now with the Pultec in. And the Expressor. And again, you hear the difference in volume, but it's also because I gain staged this one again, minus 8 dB. So we are probably at the same level as when it came in. Now, in here, you see two hardware inserts, because at the time when I mixed this song, I had these two units, the Prometheus and the Expressor, daisy chained one after the other with cables. Now I don't have anymore. I added another 8 channels, a conversion, because I had too much gear. So these are now independent, but when I mixed the song, I didn't come out and then back in and out again and back in again to go into these two. They were daisy chained. Let me show you the settings of these two. All right, the first one is the Pultec EQ. I have a boost at 5K and almost all the way wide bandwidth, and a little bit of boost at 120 with no cut at the bottom end. So I wanted to add a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of beef. So that's why the low frequency is so high. It catches the lower fundamental of the snare and it beefs it up. Then I have the THD in med. So this is the saturation that the West Audio has. Let me play you with and without the West. For the compression, we have a ratio of 3:4, and on the Elysia is very, very grabby. The release is about 85 milliseconds, and the attack is pretty slow. It's at 40 milliseconds, as you can see. Mix all the way up and gain about 4 dB, 3.5. Now, this is important. I have a gain reduction limiting set as 7 dB. That means that no matter how low I put the threshold, the compressor will not compress more than 7 dB. This is important because in this way I can have a very grabby compressor behavior-wise, but I'm not over compressing the snare. The sidechain is at 200 Hertz, and let's hear it with and without. I also have the warm engaged. This is the saturation of the Elysia, which also has a little bit of low-mid color. So with and without. Absolutely love this compressor. You hear it, the tail, how it bounces and how it's brought up after the initial transient. I really like this compressor. Pay attention once again at what it does to the tail and the attack. All right, these are the settings for the snare.